The Serpent of the Hippie Trail. The Charles Sobhraj Story. Imagine walking along a sun-drenched beach in Thailand. A charming stranger offers you a drink. He speaks 6 languages. He quotes Nietzsche. He wears a Cartier watch and smells of expensive cologne. And by morning, you will be dead, robbed, poisoned, and burned beyond recognition on a lonely stretch of road. His name was Charles Sobhraj, and for nearly a decade, he slithered through Southeast Asia, leaving a trail of young Western backpackers who would never return home. The locals called him the Serpent. Interpol called him one of the most dangerous men alive. But to the travelers he preyed upon, he was simply a friend, the last friend they would ever make. The 1970s were a golden age of wanderlust. Thousands of young Westerners, Americans, Australians, Canadians, French, Dutch, abandoned the rigid expectations of their societies and embarked on what became known as the Hippie Trail. This overland route stretched from Istanbul through Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, and into the beaches of Thailand. They traveled with little money, open hearts, and a dangerous naivety about the world they were entering. They carried dog-eared copies of Kerouac. They sought enlightenment in ashrams and cheap hashish in Kathmandu. They trusted strangers because that was the philosophy: love, peace, universal brotherhood. The counterculture had taught them that borders were illusions and that human beings were fundamentally good. For most of them, this was true. But for the ones who crossed paths with Charles Sobhraj, this beautiful idealism became a fatal vulnerability. Between 1972 and 1976, a sophisticated and ruthless predator operated along this trail, targeting the very travelers who believed the world was a safe and welcoming place. What makes this case so chilling is not merely the body count, though estimates range from 12 to over 20 victims. It is the cold, methodical, almost theatrical nature of the crimes. And it is the terrifying realization that the killer didn't hide in the shadows. He stood in the sunlight, smiling, extending his hand. Charles Sobhraj was born Hachand Paunani Gurumukh Sobhraj on April 6, 1944 in Saigon, French Indochina, modern-day Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. His birth itself was a story of displacement and rejection. His mother, Song, was a Vietnamese woman of modest means. His father, Sobhraj, was an Indian Sindhi merchant from a conservative family who ultimately refused to acknowledge the boy as his legitimate son. Charles entered this world unwanted, a half-Vietnamese, half-Indian child in a colonial society that valued neither identity. When Charles was still a toddler, his father abandoned the family. His mother eventually entered a relationship with a French military officer named Alphonse Darrow, and the family relocated to France. Darrow provided stability, but he made a crucial distinction that would scar the young Charles forever. Darrow legally adopted some of the children in the household, but not Charles. The boy was treated differently, an outsider in his own home, a child of uncertain nationality and perpetual rejection. Think about what that does to a developing mind. Every child craves belonging. Every child needs to feel chosen. Charles Sobhraj was unchosen, repeatedly, systematically by the people who were supposed to love him most. He grew up shuttling between France and Indochina, never fully belonging to either world. He wasn't French enough for France. He wasn't Vietnamese enough for Vietnam. He wasn't Indian enough for his father's family. He existed in a psychological no man's land, and in that void, something dark began to take shape. By his teenage years, Charles had developed 2 defining characteristics that would serve him for the rest of his life. The first was an extraordinary intelligence. He was sharp, perceptive, and possessed a near photographic memory for details. He could read people the way a musician reads sheet music, instantly, fluently, instinctively. The second was a complete absence of moral constraint. He began committing petty crimes in Paris: burglaries, car thefts, confidence schemes. He was arrested for the first time at age 18. In prison, he didn't despair. He networked. He studied the other criminals around him the way a graduate student studies a discipline. He learned the mechanics of deception, the art of manipulation, the science of control. A wealthy French prison visitor named Félix Descoings took an interest in young Charles, seeing him as a misunderstood soul. Descoings introduced him to high society, to fine dining, to the manners and tastes of the Parisian elite. Charles absorbed it all with the desperate hunger of a man who had been denied everything. He learned to dress impeccably, to speak with authority, to present himself as a cosmopolitan gentleman of means. The street criminal was refashioning himself into something far more dangerous, a con artist of extraordinary sophistication. In 1969, Charles married a young Frenchwoman named Chantal Compagnon, the daughter of a conservative Parisian family. Chantal was captivated by his charm, his exotic appearance, his stories of adventure. She saw romance where there was manipulation. She saw mystery where there was pathology. They had a daughter together, Madhu. But the marriage was doomed from the start. Charles could not stop stealing, lying, and running. They traveled to Asia together, ostensibly for a fresh start, but Charles immediately returned to crime, passport theft, gem scams, confidence tricks, targeting tourists. Chantal eventually fled back to France with their daughter, horrified by the man she had married. But Charles barely noticed her absence. He had found something far more intoxicating than love. He had found the hippie trail, an endless supply of trusting, cash-carrying, passport-holding young Westerners moving through countries with minimal law enforcement infrastructure. To Charles Sobhraj, this wasn't a countercultural movement. It was a hunting ground. The precise moment Charles Sobhraj graduated from con artist to killer remains a matter of debate. Some investigators believe the first murders occurred as early as 1972. Others place the beginning in 1975. What is certain is that by mid-1975, Sobhraj had established a base of operations in Bangkok, Thailand, and had assembled a small team of loyal accomplices who helped him identify, befriend, drug, rob, and ultimately eliminate his victims. His method was diabolically simple. He would approach young backpackers at hostels, restaurants, or popular tourist gathering spots. He presented himself as a gem dealer, a businessman, sometimes a doctor. He was impeccably dressed, unfailingly generous, and devastatingly charming. He spoke French, English, Hindi, Thai, and several other languages with easy fluency. He offered help, a ride to the next city, a place to stay, a business opportunity, medical advice. In a world of budget travelers sleeping on dirty floors, Charles Sobhraj was a figure of glamour and authority. Who wouldn't trust him? His most loyal accomplice was Marie-André Leclerc, a quiet, emotionally fragile Canadian woman from Lévis, Quebec. Marie-André had met Charles during her own travels and had fallen hopelessly in love with him. She was plain, insecure, and desperate for the kind of excitement and validation that Charles seemed to offer. He made her feel beautiful. He made her feel important. And in exchange, she helped him lure victims, administer drugs, and dispose of evidence. How does someone become complicit in murder? Was Marie-André a villain, or was she another of Sobhraj's victims, psychologically imprisoned by a man who understood exactly how to exploit her loneliness? Another key accomplice was Ajay Chowdhury, an Indian man who served as Sobhraj's enforcer and logistical support. Ajay was physically imposing and unquestioningly loyal. Together, this trio operated what investigators would later describe as a miniature criminal empire, moving through Thailand, Nepal, India, and Hong Kong with terrifying efficiency. The first confirmed victims were Teresa Knowlton, a young American woman from Seattle, and Vitaly Hakim, a Turkish man traveling through Thailand. Teresa's body was found on the shore of the Gulf of Thailand in October 1975. She was wearing a floral bikini. She had been strangled and drowned. Police identified her as Teresa, but the case went nowhere. Thai authorities lacked the resources and, frankly, the motivation to investigate the death of a foreign backpacker. She was just another drifter, another hippie who had wandered too far from home. Vitaly Hakim's burned remains were discovered on the road between Pattaya and Bangkok in December 1975. His body was so badly charred that identification took weeks. When his girlfriend, Charmaine Carreau, a Frenchwoman, came looking for him, she too vanished. Her body was later found in the same area, similarly burned. Can you sense the pattern forming? The Serpent didn't just kill once and disappear. He killed repeatedly, methodically, in the same geographic area using the same techniques, drugging, strangling, burning, and yet nobody connected the dots. Each death was treated as an isolated incident. Each victim was just another missing traveler in a part of the world where people disappeared all the time. Two Dutch students, Henk Bentanja and Cornelia Hemker, arrived in Bangkok in December 1975. They were young, idealistic, and eager to explore Southeast Asia. They met Charles Sobhraj at his apartment, where he hosted a kind of revolving salon for travelers. He offered them food, shelter, and companionship. Within days, both were dead, strangled, and burned. Their bodies were found on the outskirts of Bangkok, identified only by dental records weeks later. The killing machine was operating at full capacity. and the world hadn't even noticed. The first crack in Sobhraj's armor came not from police work, but from the courage of a single individual, a Dutch diplomat named Herman Knippenberg, stationed at the Netherlands Embassy in Bangkok. When the families of Henk Bentanja and Cornelia Hemker contacted the embassy in desperation, asking for help locating their missing children, Knippenberg took their pleas seriously. He was meticulous, principled, and deeply troubled by the growing number of Western tourists who seemed to be vanishing into thin air across Thailand. Knippenberg began his own unofficial investigation, and what he uncovered was staggering. Working with limited resources and almost no cooperation from Thai police, he painstakingly cross-referenced travel records, hotel registries, and missing persons reports from multiple embassies. He identified a pattern: young Westerners arriving in Bangkok, staying at or near a specific apartment complex in the Cannet House building on Sukhumvit Road, and then disappearing. Passport photos and eyewitness descriptions began to converge on a single figure: a well-dressed man of Eurasian appearance who went by multiple names: Alain Gauthier, Daniel, Henricus, and others. Knippenberg presented his findings to Thai authorities. They were dismissive. Tourism was Thailand's economic lifeblood in the 1970s, and the last thing officials wanted was an international scandal about murdered backpackers. The diplomat was essentially told to mind his own business, but Knippenberg refused to stop. He contacted Interpol. He reached out to journalists. He built a case file that would eventually become one of the most comprehensive dossiers ever assembled on a serial killer operating across international borders. Meanwhile, Sobhraj wasn't slowing down. He had moved his operations temporarily to Nepal, where in 1975 he is believed to have killed at least 2 more victims: Connie Jo Bronzik, an American, and Laurent Ormond Carrière, a Canadian. Their bodies were found in Kathmandu, stabbed and burned. Nepalese police investigated but had no leads. The murders were attributed to robbery. Here's what made Sobhraj so extraordinarily difficult to catch. He operated across multiple countries, each with its own police force, its own bureaucratic systems, its own priorities. There was no unified Southeast Asian law enforcement network. Interpol could issue alerts but had no power to arrest. Thai police didn't share information with Nepalese police. Indian authorities had their own massive caseloads. Charles Sobhraj exploited these jurisdictional gaps with the instincts of a chess grandmaster, always staying one move ahead, always crossing a border just before the net could close. He also had an unnerving ability to talk his way out of trouble. On multiple occasions, he was questioned by authorities in various countries and released. He used forged passports to cross borders freely. He bribed officials when charm wasn't sufficient. He cultivated relationships with powerful people who could vouch for him. The Serpent didn't just evade capture. He made a mockery of the systems designed to stop him. But Knippenberg persisted. His file grew thicker. International media began picking up the story. A picture was emerging, not of random, unconnected murders, but of a single predator systematically hunting along the Hippie trail. And the name that kept surfacing, the name that connected everything, was Charles Sobhraj. By early 1976, Sobhraj sensed the pressure building. Knippenberg's investigation had generated enough attention that Thai police could no longer completely ignore the situation. Warrants were being discussed. Embassies were asking uncomfortable questions. For the first time, the Serpent felt the walls beginning to close in. What did Charles Sobhraj do when he sensed danger? He didn't run. He escalated. This is the hallmark of a psychopath operating at the highest level, the belief that the rules simply do not apply to him, that his intelligence will always outmaneuver any threat. And for a terrifyingly long time, he was right. In the spring of 1976, Sobhraj relocated to India, where he continued his operations with barely a pause. He drugged and robbed tourists in Varanasi, Calcutta, and Goa. He assumed new identities with the ease of changing a shirt. He was David Gore, a French professor. He was Henri Dupuis, a gem merchant. He was anyone he needed to be at any given moment in any given country. But the critical turning point came in July 1976 in New Delhi. Sobhraj, accompanied by his accomplices, targeted a group of French postgraduate students staying at a hotel. His plan was characteristically audacious: drug all of them simultaneously using laced drinks, then rob them of their passports and valuables. It was a plan he had executed dozens of times before without a hitch. This time, however, the dosages were wrong. Whether by miscalculation or carelessness, Sobhraj administered too much sedative to several of the students. Instead of becoming groggy and compliant, they became violently ill. They collapsed in the hotel lobby. They vomited. They convulsed. Hotel staff called for medical assistance. And when the chaos erupted, several of the students who had consumed less of the drugged drinks were still alert enough to identify the man who had given them the tainted beverages. Charles Sobhraj was caught, not through brilliant police work, not through forensic evidence, but through his own overconfidence. The very arrogance that had made him so successful had finally betrayed him. Indian police arrested him at the hotel, and when they searched his belongings, they found a veritable museum of crime. Dozens of passports from various countries, vials of sedatives and poisons, precious gems of dubious origin, and detailed notes about potential targets. The arrest sent shockwaves through the international law enforcement community. Herman Knippenberg's meticulous file was finally validated. Thai authorities, Nepalese authorities, and Hong Kong police all began requesting extradition. The scope of Sobhraj's crimes was becoming clear, and it was almost incomprehensible. One man, operating for years across half a continent, had drugged, robbed, and murdered with near-total impunity. But the legal complications were enormous. India had him in custody for the drugging of the French tourists, a serious crime, but not murder. Thailand wanted him for multiple homicides. Nepal wanted him for at least 2 killings. Each country had legitimate claims. And Sobhraj, ever the chess player, understood the legal landscape better than most lawyers. He knew that Thai law, at the time, carried the death penalty for murder. He knew that India did not for the specific charges he faced. The Serpent began a calculated legal strategy to ensure he would serve his time in India, and only in India. The trial in India was a spectacle. Charles Sobhraj appeared in court impeccably dressed, calm, and almost amused by the proceedings. He represented himself with startling competence, challenging evidence, cross-examining witnesses, and delivering philosophical speeches that left observers alternately fascinated and repulsed. He wasn't just a defendant, he was performing. The courtroom was his stage, and he played it with the same lethal charm he had used on the Hippie trail. He was convicted in 1977 of robbery and administering drugs with intent to commit theft. The sentence was 12 years in Tihar jail, one of India's most notorious prisons. For most people, this would be a nightmare. For Charles Sobhraj, it was a strategic victory. As long as he remained incarcerated in India, he could not be extradited to Thailand, where the death penalty awaited him. But even behind bars, the Serpent continued to manipulate his environment with chilling effectiveness. Tihar jail was supposed to break him. Instead, he conquered it. He bribed guards. He obtained special privileges, better food, books, visits from journalists and admirers. He gave interviews to international media, positioning himself not as a monster, but as a misunderstood genius, a victim of colonialism and racial prejudice. Incredibly, he cultivated a kind of celebrity status. Women wrote him love letters. True crime enthusiasts sought his autograph. He lived in a relative comfort that most inmates could not fathom. Then came his most audacious gambit. In March 1986, with his sentence nearing completion and the Thai warrant for his arrest still active, Sobhraj threw a lavish party for his guards and fellow inmates inside the prison. The food and drinks were, of course, drugged. While everyone slept, Charles Sobhraj simply walked out of Tihar jail. Let that sink in. He escaped from one of the most heavily guarded prisons in India by throwing a party. He was recaptured in Goa just weeks later. Some investigators believe deliberately. Why? Because his escape added years to his Indian sentence, which meant he could not be extradited to Thailand. By the time he eventually completed his extended sentence, the 20-year statute of limitations on his Thai murder charges would have expired. It was a masterstroke of criminal manipulation, and it worked exactly as planned. Was he a genius? Was he simply devoid of the moral limitations that constrain the rest of us? Or was he something else entirely? A man so broken by his childhood that he spent his entire life proving he could outmaneuver a world that had rejected him from birth. Charles Sobhraj was released from Tihar jail in February 1997, having served a total of 21 years. He returned to France a free man. The Thai murder charges had indeed expired under the statute of limitations. He was legally untouchable. He lived in Paris for several years, enjoying a bizarre celebrity status. He charged journalists for interviews. He hired a publicist. He consulted on a film about his life. He dined at fine restaurants, attended parties, and showed not a flicker of remorse for his victims or their shattered families. But the Serpent made one final catastrophic miscalculation. In 2003, inexplicably, Charles Sobhraj returned to Nepal, the one country where murder charges against him had no statute of limitations. He was spotted at a casino in Kathmandu, recognized and arrested. Was it arrogance? Was it some deep psychological compulsion to return to the scene of his crimes? Was it the narcissistic belief that he was simply uncatchable? In 2004, a Nepalese court convicted him of the 1975 murders of Connie Jo Bronzich and Laurent Ormond Carrière. He was sentenced to life in prison. An appeal in 2010 upheld the conviction. Charles Sobhraj, the man who had evaded justice across a dozen countries for 3 decades, was finally caged. Then, in December 2022, in a decision that shocked victims' families worldwide, Nepal's Supreme Court ordered Sobhraj's release on grounds of age and health. He was 78 years old. He was deported to France, where he currently lives as a free man. The case of Charles Sobhraj is more than a true crime story. It is a damning indictment of international law enforcement failure in the 20th century. It is a cautionary tale about the intersection of charm and evil. And it is a heartbreaking reminder that at least 12 young people, Teresa Knowlton, Vitaly Hakim, Charmaine Caro, Henk Bintanja, Cornelia Hemker, Connie Jo Bronzich, Laurent Ormond Carrière, and others whose names may never be known, set out to discover the beauty of the world and instead met a predator who saw their trust as weakness, their kindness as opportunity. Herman Knippenberg, the Dutch diplomat who dedicated years of his life to building the case, has said that justice was never truly served. The families of the victims have echoed this sentiment. Sobhraj himself has never expressed a single word of genuine remorse. Marie-Andrée Leclerc was convicted separately and sentenced to life in India, but she was released on medical grounds after being diagnosed with ovarian cancer. She died in 1984, maintaining until her last breath that she had been a victim of Sobhraj's manipulation. Ajay Chowdhury disappeared in 1976 and was never seen again. Many investigators believe Sobhraj killed him to eliminate a witness. So here's the question that haunts this case, the question I want you to consider and leave in the comments below. How is it possible that a man responsible for the murders of at least a dozen innocent people is alive, free, and walking the streets of Paris today? Is this justice? Or is this the final proof that Charles Sobhraj, the Serpent, has outmaneuvered the world one last time? If this story disturbed you, it should. Subscribe to Darkness Unveiled, share this video, and remember the names of the victims, because the world forgot them once. Let's not let that happen again.